Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender and watched space bend in front of his ship. The stars twisted like water going down a drain, and then suddenly there they were. Alien ships, lots of them. Jake had never seen anything like these vessels before. They looked like someone had taken liquid metal and shaped it into teardrops the size of mountains. Each ship glowed with a soft blue light that made them seem almost alive. There were 12 of them, arranged in a perfect circle around Earth, and they were all pointing their weapons at his planet. Jake turned to look at his crew. Lieutenant Lisa Chang sat at the communication station with her fingers dancing over the controls. She had been with him for 3 years, and Jake trusted her completely. Next to her was Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks, who handled all the weapons and defense systems. Ryan was young, but he was smart, and he never panicked under pressure. The rest of the bridge crew looked nervous but ready. They all knew this moment would come someday. Humanity had been preparing for first contact with aliens for decades. They just hoped it would be friendlier than this. The communication board started flashing with incoming signals. Lisa looked up at Jake and nodded. He straightened his uniform and walked to the center of the bridge. Whatever was about to happen would change everything for the human race. Jake took a deep breath and prepared himself for the most important conversation in human history. The main screen flickered and then showed the face of something that was definitely not human. The alien looked like it was made of living crystal, with features that seemed to shift and change as Jake watched. Its eyes were like liquid silver, and they looked at Jake with what seemed like boredom. When it spoke, its voice was perfect English, but it sounded like it was talking to a child. The alien said its name was Admiral Velthar of the Zephyrian Empire, and it explained that Earth now belonged to them. Jake listened as the Admiral told him that humans had 72 hours to surrender or they would all die. The way the alien spoke made it clear that this was just another day at work for him. Jake got the feeling that Admiral Velthar had given this same speech to dozens of other species before humans. Jake looked around his bridge again and saw his crew watching him carefully. They were waiting to see how their commander would respond to this threat. Jake had spent his whole career in the Space Force preparing for moments like this. He had read every book about military strategy and studied every famous battle in human history. But none of that had prepared him for talking to an alien who acted like conquering planets was as normal as brushing his teeth. Jake stepped forward and introduced himself politely to Admiral Velthar. He thanked the alien for the introduction, but explained that Earth was not interested in surrendering today. Jake suggested that maybe they could talk about this situation like civilized people instead of making threats. He kept his voice calm and friendly, even though his heart was beating fast enough to power a small city. Admiral Velthar made a sound that might have been laughter if aliens could laugh. He told Jake that humans did not understand their situation at all. The Admiral explained that the Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 star systems and that human technology was like stone tools compared to their advanced weapons. He said that human ships moved too slowly and their weapons were too weak to fight against quantum disruption technology. The Admiral made it very clear that this was not a discussion between equals. Jake nodded as if he was thinking about what the Admiral had said. Then he smiled the way his grandfather used to smile when someone underestimated him at poker. Jake told Admiral Velthar that humans had a saying about not starting fights they could not finish. He said this was the Admiral's only warning and that he should think carefully about what he was doing. The alien's expression changed to something that looked like amusement, mixed with surprise. Admiral Velthar clearly had not expected a primitive species to threaten him back. The Admiral said something in his own language to someone off-screen, and then looked back at Jake with those liquid silver eyes. He told Jake that humans would learn the price of defiance very soon. The communication ended, and the main screen went black. Jake stood in the middle of his bridge looking at the reflection of his own face in the dark screen. Around him, his crew waited for orders. Outside their ship, 12 alien vessels hung in space like sleeping giants waiting to wake up and destroy everything Jake had ever cared about. Lisa turned around in her chair and asked Jake what they should do next. Ryan was already checking their weapon systems, even though everyone knew human weapons could not hurt ships that advanced. The rest of the crew looked scared, but determined. They were ready to fight even if they could not win. Jake walked over to his command chair and sat down slowly. He pressed a button that connected him to Earth Command and requested an immediate conference with all the military leaders. Then he pressed another button that sent a message to every human ship in the solar system. The message was simple, but it would start something that the Zephyrian Empire had never seen before. The message said that humanity was now at war, but this would not be the kind of war that Admiral Velthar expected. Jake looked out at the alien ships one more time and smiled. The Zephyrians thought they knew what war was, but they had never fought humans before. They were about to learn that some species did not just fight to win. Some species fought to make sure their enemies never felt safe again. Jake opened a channel to all human military units and spoke the words that would begin humanity's most important battle. He told them that the aliens wanted a war and humans were going to give them exactly what they asked for. But it would be a human war, fought the human way with human rules. The aliens would soon discover that conquering Earth was not the hard part. The hard part would be sleeping peacefully afterwards, knowing that humans were still out there in the dark. Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked through the underground corridors beneath Geneva, carrying a tablet full of information that would change how humans thought about war forever. The meeting room was deep underground in a bunker that could survive a direct nuclear hit. Today it would host the most important military briefing in human history. Elena pushed open the heavy door and saw the people who would decide how humanity would fight for its survival. General Patrick Hayes sat at the head of the table, looking like he had aged 10 years in the past day. He was the kind of soldier who had spent his whole life preparing for battles he hoped would never come. Admiral Susan Carter sat across from him, reviewing reports from every human ship in the solar system. She was known for being calm under pressure, but Elena could see worry lines around her eyes that had not been there yesterday. Director Alex Turner from Colonial Intelligence was reading something on his tablet that made him frown deeply. Alex was the person who knew more about alien technology than anyone else on Earth, even though until yesterday, aliens had only existed in theory. Dr. Rodriguez took her seat and opened her presentation files. She was about to explain why humanity was in more trouble than anyone realized. Elena started by showing them pictures of the Zephyrian ships taken by long-range telescopes. The alien vessels were beautiful in a way that human ships could never be. Every line was perfect, and every surface seemed to bend light in impossible ways. Elena explained that these ships used technology that was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could destroy matter at the molecular level, and their shields could stop anything humans might throw at them. General Hayes asked about the aliens themselves, and Elena pulled up the data they had gathered from the brief communication. The Zephyrians were an ancient species that had been conquering other worlds for over 2,000 years. They moved through space like a force of nature, taking what they wanted and leaving behind grateful subjects. Elena explained that every species the Zephyrians had ever encountered had either surrendered immediately or fought traditional battles that ended quickly. Admiral Carter wanted to know more about these traditional battles, and Elena showed them recordings that Zephyrian ships had broadcast. The aliens seemed to think that sharing their military victories was good for public relations. Elena played videos of space battles that looked more like elaborate dances than wars. Ships moved in perfect formations and fired weapons that created beautiful light shows before entire planets surrendered. The conquered species always fought the same way, Elena explained. They built the biggest ships they could and loaded them with the most powerful weapons they had. Then they flew those ships in neat formations toward the Zephyrian fleet and tried to win through superior firepower. It never worked, but every species tried the same approach. Elena said it was like watching the same play performed by different actors over and over again. Director Turner asked why these other species never tried different tactics, and Elena pulled up her analysis of Zephyrian psychology. The aliens viewed warfare as a civilized activity with rules and proper procedures. They expected their enemies to fight with honor and dignity. When a species surrendered, the Zephyrians treated them well and made them productive members of the Empire. It was actually a very efficient system for everyone involved. Elena explained that the Zephyrians had never encountered a species that fought dirty or used psychological warfare. Every battle they had ever fought followed the same pattern. The enemy would challenge them to honorable combat in space, and the Zephyrians would win through superior technology. Then everyone would shake hands and move on with their lives. Elena said it was almost like the aliens were playing a game with rules that everyone understood. General Hayes stood up and walked to the window that showed the surface far above them. He asked Elena what she thought would happen if someone changed the rules of the game. Elena said that based on her analysis, the Zephyrians would not know how to respond to unconventional tactics. They had become so used to winning the same way that they might not be able to adapt to something completely different. Admiral Carter asked about human military history and how it compared to alien warfare. Elena pulled up a new presentation that made everyone in the room very quiet. She showed them graphs that compared human conflicts to every alien war in the Zephyrian database. Human wars lasted longer, used more resources, and caused more psychological damage than anything the aliens had ever seen. Elena explained that humans were the only species on Earth that regularly fought wars against their own kind for reasons that other animals would find completely insane. Humans had turned warfare into an art form that involved not just destroying the enemy, but breaking their will to fight. Elena said that human military tactics included things like propaganda, misinformation, sabotage, and psychological operations that were completely unknown to the Zephyrians. Director Turner smiled for the first time since the meeting started and asked Elena to explain what she meant by psychological operations. Elena told them about human military units that specialized in making the enemy afraid, confused, and unable to make good decisions. She said humans had learned how to fight wars inside their enemies' minds as well as on the battlefield. General Hayes asked if Elena thought these tactics would work against aliens, and she said that was the interesting question. The Zephyrians had evolved in a completely different environment, and their brains worked differently than human brains. But Elena had noticed something important in the brief communication with Admiral Velthar. The alien had shown surprise when Commander Morrison had threatened him back. Elena said this suggested that Zephyrians could experience emotions like confusion and uncertainty, just like humans could. Admiral Carter asked what Elena recommended, and the scientist looked around the room at the military leaders who would have to implement whatever plan they developed. Elena said that humans should not try to fight the Zephyrians the way every other species had fought them. Instead, humans should do what humans did best, which was find new ways to make their enemies miserable. Elena explained that the Zephyrian Empire was like a machine that had been running the same program for thousands of years. It was very good at conquering planets using conventional warfare, but it had never been tested against an enemy that refused to follow the program. Elena said that if humans could confuse the machine and make it malfunction, they might be able to win without ever firing a shot. General Hayes asked how they could confuse an entire alien empire, and Elena smiled. She said that humans had been confusing each other for thousands of years, and they had gotten very good at it. The Zephyrians expected humans to build big ships and fight honorable battles in space. Instead, humans should disappear into the dark and make the aliens wonder where they were and what they were planning next. Colonel Danny Foster floated in complete darkness inside his modified fighter ship and watched the Zephyrian fleet through sensors that the aliens could not detect. His ship looked nothing like the sleek vessels that humans usually built for space combat. Instead, it was an ugly collection of parts that had been bolted together in ways that would make any engineer cry. But Danny loved his ship because it was invisible to alien technology, and that made it the most dangerous weapon in human space. Danny had volunteered for this mission the moment he heard about it. The plan was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. 47 human pilots would spread out through the solar system and hide in places where the aliens would never think to look. Then they would begin a campaign of psychological warfare that would slowly drive the Zephyrian Empire insane. Danny had read the mission briefing 3 times, and each time it had sounded more like something from a horror movie than a military operation. The Zephyrian ships maintained their perfect formation around Earth like they were posing for a photograph. Admiral Velthar clearly believed that superior technology was all he needed to win this war. Danny could see the alien flagship from his hiding spot behind a mining asteroid, and he had to admit it was impressive. The ship was almost 2 miles long, and it glowed with energy that could probably destroy a planet if the Admiral decided he was feeling cranky. Danny checked his instruments and confirmed that all 47 human ships were in position. Phoenix Squadron had scattered throughout the solar system like seeds in the wind, and now they were ready to grow into something that would give the aliens nightmares. Danny opened the encrypted communication channel and listened to his fellow pilots reporting their positions one by one. Lisa Murphy was hiding in the shadow of the moon using its gravity to mask her heat signature. Her ship was equipped with broadcasting equipment that could send signals on frequencies the aliens had never heard before. Tony Garcia had positioned himself near Jupiter and was using the giant planet's radiation to hide his electronic signature. His ship carried devices that could hack into alien computer systems using human chaos theory instead of logical programming. Betty Williams had somehow managed to hide her ship inside the rings of Saturn, where the ice particles would confuse any sensors trying to find her. She carried weapons that were not designed to destroy alien ships, but to attach to their hulls and drive their crews crazy with sounds and smells from Earth. Amy Thompson was closest to the alien fleet, hiding in a debris field that looked like space junk, but was actually a carefully constructed blind spot. Each pilot carried different equipment designed for different kinds of psychological warfare. Some had broadcasting devices that could fill alien ships with disturbing sounds. Others had computer viruses that would make alien systems display confusing images. A few carried devices that could release chemicals into alien ship ventilation systems that would smell like things the aliens had never experienced before. Danny listened to Admiral Carter's voice coming through his earpiece as she coordinated the operation from Earth Command. She reminded all pilots that their mission was not to destroy the alien ships, but to make the aliens wish they had never heard of Earth. The plan was to slowly escalate psychological pressure until the Zephyrian Empire decided that conquering humanity was more trouble than it was worth. The first phase began exactly 72 hours after the alien ultimatum had expired. Lisa Murphy activated her broadcasting equipment and sent a signal toward the nearest Zephyrian ship. The signal was not threatening or aggressive. Instead, it was something much worse. It was the sound of children laughing mixed with music from Earth and the gentle noise of wind blowing through trees. For aliens who had evolved on a crystal world without weather or forests, the sounds were deeply unsettling. Danny watched through his sensors as the alien ship began scanning in all directions, trying to find the source of the transmission. But Lisa's ship was completely hidden, and her signal was bouncing off the moon's surface, making it impossible to trace. The aliens could hear human children playing, but they could not figure out where the sound was coming from. Danny could imagine the confusion spreading through the alien ship as crew members tried to understand what they were hearing. Phase 2 began when Tony Garcia activated his hacking program and sent it toward the alien flagship. The virus was not designed to damage alien systems, but to confuse them in ways they had never experienced before. Instead of attacking alien computers with logical instructions, the virus used random patterns based on human art and music. It spread through alien networks like gossip, jumping from system to system in ways that made no sense to Zephyrian programmers. Soon the flagship's displays were showing images from Earth that the aliens had never seen before. Pictures of human families enjoying picnics, videos of children building sandcastles on beaches, recordings of thunderstorms and ocean waves. For aliens who lived in sterile crystal cities, these images were as alien as their technology was to humans. The Zephyrians found themselves staring at a world full of chaos and beauty that they could not understand. Betty Williams began Phase 3 by launching tiny devices toward the alien ships like seeds floating on solar wind. The devices were too small for alien sensors to detect, but they carried something more dangerous than any weapon. Each device contained recordings of human laughter, human crying, and human singing. When they attached to alien hulls, they would play these sounds through the metal itself, turning entire ships into musical instruments that played human emotions. Danny could see the effect on the alien formation as ship after ship began receiving these psychological attacks. The perfect military formation started to waver as individual captains tried to deal with the strange experiences their crews were reporting. Some ships moved closer together as if seeking comfort from their neighbors. Others broke formation entirely and began random search patterns looking for enemies they could not find. Admiral Felthar's voice began broadcasting on open frequencies as he tried to contact the human fleet that he assumed must be attacking his ships. But there was no human fleet in the traditional sense. There were just 47 people floating in, the dark playing sounds and showing pictures that slowly drove an entire alien empire toward madness. The Admiral demanded that humans fight honorably like civilized beings, but humans had decided that civilization was overrated. Amy Thompson launched the final phase of the first wave when she sent a message directly to Admiral Velthar's personal communication system. The message was simple but terrifying in its implications. It was a human child's drawing done in crayon showing stick figures holding hands around a blue planet. Below the drawing were words written in a child's handwriting that said, "We are all friends under the same stars." The message was innocent and sweet, but its implications were horrifying for any military commander. The fact that humans could reach the Admiral's personal systems meant they could reach anything on his ship. The fact that they chose to send a child's drawing instead of a threat meant they were playing by rules that the Admiral did not understand. Danny could imagine the alien commander staring at that drawing and realizing that he was fighting an enemy that thought like no other species in the galaxy. Captain Zekthar stood on the bridge of his destroyer and tried to understand what was happening to his ship and his crew. 3 days had passed since the psychological attacks began, and nothing made sense anymore. His communications officer had stopped sleeping because every time he closed his eyes he heard human children singing songs about friendship and rainbows. His tactical officer kept seeing images of Earth animals on his displays instead of targeting information. The entire bridge crew looked like they had been awake for weeks, even though alien biology normally required very little rest. Zekthar had served in the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet for over 200 years and had participated in 17 planetary conquests. Every previous campaign had followed the same predictable pattern. The target species would build large ships and attempt to fight honorable battles in space. The Zephyrians would demonstrate their superior technology and accept the inevitable, surrender. Then everyone would move on with their lives like civilized beings. But humans refused to follow this pattern, and Zekthar was beginning to understand why his emperor had conquered 47 star systems without ever encountering anything like this. The latest incident had occurred during the night cycle when most of his crew should have been resting. Somehow the humans had filled his ship's ventilation system with the smell of something they called fresh-baked bread. Zekthar had no idea what bread was, but the smell had caused his entire crew to experience something they had never felt before. It was warm and comforting and completely terrifying because it came from an enemy that could apparently reach into their ship whenever it wanted to. Admiral Velthar's face appeared on the bridge display looking more confused and frustrated than any Zephyrian military commander should ever look. The Admiral had been trying to coordinate a response to the human attacks, but it was difficult to fight an enemy that refused to show itself. Every time the fleet tried to locate the source of the psychological warfare, the signals would stop and then start again from a completely different location. It was like trying to catch shadows that could move faster than light. Velthar asked Zekthar for a status report on his ship's condition, and the captain tried to explain what his crew had been experiencing. The humans had somehow made his weapons displays show pictures of Earth children playing games that looked like miniature versions of space battles. His navigation systems kept playing what humans called music, which was organized sound that seemed to have emotional effects on anyone who heard it. Most disturbing of all, his personal quarters now smelled like something humans called flowers, which were apparently colorful plants that existed only to be beautiful. The Admiral listened to this report with an expression that would have been impossible on any Zephyrian face before humans entered their lives. Velthar looked tired and uncertain, which were emotions that the Zephyrian Empire had not experienced in over 1,000 years. The Admiral told Zekthar that similar reports were coming from every ship in the fleet, and that he was beginning to question fundamental assumptions about warfare that had served the Empire for millennia. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human military leaders watched their psychological warfare campaign through sensors and communication intercepts that showed them exactly how much damage they were causing to alien morale. General Hayes had initially been skeptical about fighting a war with children's drawings and flower smells, but the results were undeniable. The most powerful military force in the galaxy was slowly falling apart because humans had decided to fight with their emotions instead of their weapons. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the psychological profiles of individual alien crew members through the computer viruses that Tony Garcia had planted in their systems. The Zephyrians were experiencing stress levels that were off the charts for their species. They had evolved in a predictable environment where everything had its proper place and purpose. The chaotic creativity of human warfare was causing mental breakdowns across their entire fleet. Elena explained to the military commanders that humans had accidentally discovered the Zephyrian Empire's greatest weakness. The aliens were so used to ordered civilized warfare that they had no defense against enemies who refused to be civilized. Every human attack was designed to be confusing rather than destructive, and this was causing more damage than any weapon could inflict. Colonel Danny Foster received new orders from Earth Command that would escalate the psychological warfare to levels that might permanently traumatize the alien fleet. His target was Admiral Velthar's flagship, and his mission was to plant a device that would turn the most powerful ship in the Zephyrian fleet into a monument to human creativity. Danny guided his invisible fighter through the alien formation until he was close enough to touch the flagship's hull. The device that Danny attached to the alien ship was smaller than a dinner plate, but it contained something more dangerous than any bomb. It was loaded with every piece of human art and music and literature that had ever been created. When activated, it would flood the flagship's computer systems with thousands of years of human culture, including things like love songs and funny stories and paintings of beautiful landscapes that aliens had never imagined. Betty Williams received orders to escalate her own attacks by introducing alien crews to human concepts like homesickness and nostalgia. Her new devices would make alien ships smell like places the aliens had never been but would somehow miss anyway. The smells of ocean air and forest floors and morning coffee would fill alien corridors and make crew members long for homes they had never seen on a planet they were trying to conquer. Amy Thompson's new assignment was to hack into alien personal communication systems and send each crew member messages from human families. The messages would be warm and loving and completely incomprehensible to aliens who had never experienced unconditional affection. Each alien would receive letters from imaginary human relatives who missed them and wanted them to come home safely from their dangerous mission. The combined effect of these escalated attacks was devastating to alien morale. Zephyrian crew members began experiencing emotions they had no names for. They felt homesick for places they had never been. They missed people they had never met. They wanted to protect the very humans they had come to conquer because the messages from human families had made them care about beings they were supposed to destroy. Admiral Velthar tried to maintain discipline among his fleet, but found himself fighting a war against his own emotions as well as against human psychological warfare. The flagship's computer systems were showing him human art that was so beautiful, it made him question why anyone would want to destroy the species that created it. His personal quarters smelled like something humans called a garden, which was apparently a place where plants grew just to make the world more beautiful. The breaking point came when the Admiral received a personal message from a human child named Lucy, who wrote to tell him that she hoped he would be friends with her planet, instead of conquering it. Lucy included a drawing of aliens and humans holding hands and dancing together under a sky full of stars. She wrote that her mother had told her that all beings in the universe were probably lonely sometimes, and that maybe they could keep each other company instead of fighting. Admiral Velthar stared at Lucy's letter for over an hour, before finally opening a communication channel to Commander Morrison on Earth. The Admiral's voice sounded different than it had during their first conversation. Instead of supreme confidence and imperial authority, it carried something that sounded almost like defeat. But it was not the kind of defeat that came from losing battles. It was the kind of defeat that came from realizing that everything you thought you knew about the universe was wrong. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender and watched the most powerful alien fleet in the galaxy, behaving like confused children who had lost their way home. The psychological warfare campaign had exceeded every expectation and achieved something that no human military leader had dared to hope for. The Zephyrian Empire was asking for negotiations instead of demanding surrender. Jake could see the alien ships on his display, and they were no longer maintaining their perfect formation. Instead, they drifted through space like they were too tired to remember what they were supposed to be doing. The communication request from Admiral Velthar came through normal diplomatic channels, rather than the Imperial broadcast system the alien had used before. Jake could see immediately that something fundamental had changed in the alien commander. Velthar's crystalline features looked dulled, and his liquid silver eyes seemed to have lost their shine. When the Admiral spoke, his voice carried a weariness that Jake had never heard from any Zephyrian before. Admiral Velthar began by saying that the Zephyrian Empire was prepared to offer humanity revised terms for their surrender. The new terms included significant autonomy rights and protection for human culture and customs. The Admiral explained that the Empire had never encountered a species quite like humanity, and that special considerations might be necessary. Jake could hear uncertainty in the alien's voice and realized that Admiral Velthar was no longer sure about anything. Jake looked around his bridge at the crew members who had helped coordinate the most unusual military campaign in human history. Lieutenant Lisa Chang was monitoring communication intercepts from the alien fleet, and she had reported that discipline was breaking down across all Zephyrian ships. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks had been tracking alien ship movements and confirmed that their tactical formations were completely disorganized. The entire alien fleet was showing signs of what humans would call battle fatigue, even though no actual battles had been fought. Jake turned back to Admiral Velthar and politely thanked him for the generous offer, but explained that the Admiral seemed to misunderstand the current situation. Jake said that humans were not the ones who needed to surrender in this conflict. The Admiral had made a critical error in his assumptions about how this war would proceed, and now he was learning the consequences of that mistake. Admiral Velthar asked Jake to explain what he meant, and Jake was happy to provide some education about human military doctrine. Jake said that the Admiral had assumed this was a war, but humans did not think of it that way at all. What the Zephyrians had experienced over the past week was not warfare in any sense that their empire would recognize. It was something much more fundamental and much more dangerous. Jake explained that humans were not warriors in the traditional sense, but hunters who had evolved to pursue their prey across vast distances and long periods of time. Human military tactics were based on persistence hunting, which meant that humans would never stop pursuing their enemies even if it took generations to achieve victory. The psychological warfare campaign was just the beginning of what humans could do when they decided that someone needed to be taught a lesson. Admiral Velthar said he did not understand what Jake meant by persistence hunting, and Jake was happy to explain. Jake said that humans were the only species on Earth that hunted prey by following it until the prey became too exhausted to continue running. Human ancestors had chased animals across entire continents for days or weeks until their targets collapsed from exhaustion. This hunting method had shaped human psychology and military thinking in ways that other species could not comprehend. Jake told the Admiral that Zephyrian ships could destroy human vessels and Zephyrian weapons could devastate human planets, but none of that would end this conflict. Humans would simply disappear into the dark spaces between stars and continue hunting the Zephyrian Empire until every alien in the galaxy was too afraid to sleep peacefully. Jake said that humans had been practicing this kind of warfare against each other for thousands of years, and they had become very good at it. The Admiral asked what Jake meant by hunting the Empire, and Jake smiled the way his grandfather used to smile when someone asked a question they really did not want to know the answer to. Jake explained that the 47 ships currently conducting psychological warfare against the Zephyrian fleet were just the beginning. Humanity had thousands of ships and millions of people who could disappear into space and spend their entire lives making the Zephyrian Empire miserable. Jake said that humans could follow Zephyrian ships back to their home worlds and begin psychological campaigns that would last for decades. Human agents could infiltrate alien societies and slowly drive entire planets insane with confusion and uncertainty. Jake explained that humans had already demonstrated their ability to hack Zephyrian computer systems and access their most secure communications. This meant that no Zephyrian anywhere in the galaxy would ever be truly safe from human interference. Admiral Velthar was quiet for a long time before asking Jake what humans wanted in exchange for ending their psychological attacks. Jake said that was very simple. The Zephyrian Empire would withdraw from the solar system immediately and mark Earth as permanently off-limits to all Imperial forces. In exchange, humans would not follow the Zephyrian fleet home and introduce the rest of the Empire to the joys of human psychological warfare. The Admiral asked if Jake was threatening to attack the Zephyrian homeworlds, and Jake corrected him. Jake said this was not a threat but a promise. Humans did not make threats because threats implied that the threatened action might not happen. Jake explained that humans made promises, which meant that the promised action would definitely happen, unless the other party chose to prevent it. Jake told Admiral Velthar that the Admiral had two choices. He could withdraw his fleet and tell his empire that Earth was too dangerous to conquer, or he could try to continue his conquest and discover what happened when humans decided to hunt an entire galactic empire. Jake said that the choice was entirely up to the Admiral, but he should understand that humans would be perfectly happy with either outcome. Admiral Velthar said that he needed time to consult with his superiors, and Jake told him to take all the time he needed. But Jake also mentioned that while the Admiral was making his decision, the psychological warfare would continue and probably escalate. Jake said that his people were very creative, and they were just getting started with their campaign to drive the Zephyrian Empire insane. The communication ended, and Jake sat down in his command chair to wait for the alien response. Around him, his crew members looked amazed at what they had just witnessed. The most powerful military force in the galaxy had just asked permission to retreat from a species that had not fired a single shot at them. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system to report that alien ships throughout the solar system were showing signs of panic and confusion. 3 hours later, Admiral Velthar contacted Jake again to announce that the Zephyrian Imperial fleet would be withdrawing from human space immediately. The Admiral said that Earth would be marked as a restricted zone, and that no Imperial forces would approach the solar system in the future. Velthar also mentioned that his empire would be sharing information about humanity with other galactic powers to ensure that no one else made the same mistake he had made. Jake thanked the Admiral for his wisdom and wished him a safe journey home. As the Zephyrian ships began disappearing into hyperspace, Jake realized that humanity had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy without firing a shot. Other alien species would hear about what happened at Earth, and they would have to decide whether they wanted to be friends with humans or enemies. Jake was pretty sure he knew which choice most of them would make. 6 months later, the Galactic Council passed a resolution that everyone called the Human Clause. It stated that any species attempting to conquer humanity would be considered a threat to galactic peace, not because humans could not be defeated, but because the methods required to defeat them would fundamentally change any species that tried. Humanity had become the galaxy's apex predator by being exactly what they had always been. They were the species that turned survival into an art form and made their enemies' lives so unbearable that surrender became preferable to victory.